Everyday Life is the latest Coldplay album. It is a double album comprising of the two sides, Sunrise, Sunset. This is a pretty self-explanatory album. I sort of feel like you potentially could gain nothing from this review because I just feel like the themes are just so laid out in front of you in ways that are just so simple. It would be very difficult for you not to really interpret it any other way. Not to say that that's only what a review is for. Obviously, I'm here to give my opinion, but I just feel like talking about some of the lyrics and stuff is just going to be pretty surface level because I just don't see how you couldn't really take away some of the things I took away from this album. I mean, that being said, I'm still here to review it, so of course I will give off my thoughts, but generally this album is pretty much just everyday life. And in ways that I guess Chris Martin wants to express that everyday life can mean many things for many people around the world. It's very much just a united album that wants to bring people together. Highlight atrocities that really should not exist, I suppose. Things that are going off in the world that he is not particularly happy with. We saw recently that they are not going on a tour because they don't believe that it's environmentally friendly, so they don't want to really tour until I guess the risks are minimized in that sense. From that alone, you can tell that Chris Martin has a lot on his mind and has a lot of things to say that he really wants to get off his chest, and I think that's just pretty much this album in a nutshell. Similar problems in most Coldplay albums crop up here, and I guess I will go into those as I talk about this album in general. I guess from a musical level and a lyrical level, that's generally where the problems lie. Even as early as Parachutes, I always found some of the instrumental tones just really bland, honestly, and that's considered their best album, but I just don't really see that at all. I guess Chris as a singer is sometimes just not really particularly that interesting, and on this album, even however many years later, these same issues are pretty much there. It's just without that pop phase that they had in the early 2010s and they brought like in the mid 2010s. However, that being said, Church might be their best track on this entire double album, and it embodies everything that Coldplay have been pretty much doing since day one, which is kind of weird, but I don't know how that worked out. But then you've got other tracks that just have really simple acoustic folk melodies that I just feel like are completely taken straight out of like the Conor Oberst playbook. You've got the track WOTWPOTP, the track I believe it is. It's just such a simple little folky track that I just don't really see what they're thinking is adding to the genre or even adding to their own sound. Broken has this like traditional gospel setup, which is pretty solid, I guess, but you know, just listening to it just makes me wonder what they're really doing with the genre and adding to it. Really, they're not at all. Vocals on tracks like Cry 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 just don't particularly hit in the way I think they're supposed to. Yeah, I don't know. There's these little moments on the album that are like very much indebted to the soul era from the 70s and even like as early back as like Motown from the 60s and stuff like that. Like there's just these little sparks of clear influences where Coldplay just aren't maximizing the full potential, I don't think. Whereas an artist like Michael Kiwanuka, I think always manages to do that. And similar things kind of become an issue with the lyrics where they're just laying everything out in such a simplistic way. They're kind of feeding it into you, and like I say, the interpretations you get from these tracks are just very much there, and you're not really gaining all that much from the way they write the tracks, I don't think. Orphans being one of the better tracks in that sense, though, I just like it when an artist kind of takes a story and writes from that perspective of the person involved in the story. I think that's always quite a clever writing technique. It's pretty common, but I do quite like it when it comes up. A Syrian refugee and her father sort of wondering what their life entails from that point after the bombings which happened. And we talk about these things kind of in an abstract way, but they're very much not that when you think of the people who are there, innocent civilians who just have to wonder how they can live their lives after something like this. And that's where I kind of come to the realization that I mostly appreciate this album more so than I actually really enjoy it, because I don't think Chris Martin is doing anything wrong here. I think he's attempting to spread positive messages even when they come out a bit cheesy and a bit sappy, like on the very closing track, Everyday Life, or even on Arabesque, where he's attempting to like unify the Christians and the Muslims. Like, yeah, sure, lyrically it's incredibly corny, but I guess I at least appreciate the mentality behind it. The track Guns, which I guess is a conversation that British people cannot even relate to in any way because it's just not part of our culture at all. But you know, he's saying something, attempting to be positive. If you were American and you disagreed with it, fine. If you agreed with it, fine. But I don't really see any harm in what he's saying. You know what I mean? The way he's presenting them in Chris Martin's own fluffy, sentimental kind of way, I suppose, is what really drags them down. I mean, just think of the last few tracks I just mentioned there and how really they've been done way better by other artists that just haven't really got the same amount of star power as Coldplay. Arabesque, like Emperor X did it on Allahu Akbar so much better than pretty much any artist will ever really do, I think. But I at least appreciate Chris's idea behind it. And then you've got Guns. I mean, this year we had Quelly Chris's Guns. That entire album was written so much better collectively, just rather than this one song that just touches on it in such a really simple way. A few tracks on the album he does reflect on himself and his own life, because again, this is everyday life, so it's not just sort of stories about other things. You know, Champion of the World, I think, is more of a personal track. Probably the most painfully basic writing on the entire thing, but I kind of dig the tune. It's kind of like Church, where the tune itself of the song is pretty good, but unfortunately lyrically I'm just not really getting that much out of it. You know, the E.T. reference about flying on a bike in the outro is just like, come on, bro. And then there are tracks like When I Need a Friend that to me are just so musically weightless that you just kind of have to wonder what it is that they're trying to do with a song like this. Like, the music behind it is just so thin, and I just can't grab onto anything at all. So yeah, I guess it's Coldplay, and I'm not the biggest fan of them anyway, especially on an album level, but singles wise I think they can be really great. But yeah, I'm not really digging this one. It's just so mid that I can't really retain a lot from this. Again, though, I can't really get too mad at the messages, but I can certainly get mad at how Chris presents them. He's not a strong songwriter, I don't think, and you know, there are so many people in his field that have been writing love songs for years, and it's a shame that they don't really get that same recognition, because I just don't think Chris is really a top tier one when it comes to that. But in regards to this album particularly, I think it's a 5 out of 10. Pretty whatever. Let me know what you think of this, if you like it more than I do, if you like it less than I do, if you like it about the same. Thank you. Do have a good day. Goodbye.